Oh, you're right. Senate Judiciary is now in session. The Honorable Darrell Abbas is going to lead us in the pledge. Thank you, Senator Abbas. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Senator. Okay, we're going to start the hearing with SB 5, if my eyes will help me, 53. And Senator Fenton is introducing his bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's always good to be here in Judiciary. For the record, I am Senator Donovan Fenton, I represent District 10, and I am here to introduce Senate Bill 553 relative to penalties for attempting to elude pursuit by law enforcement. Public safety is a top priority for us here in New Hampshire. Mr. Chairman, you and I both sit on the Governor's Highway Safety Task Force, where we regularly hear from law enforcement and first responders about the very real dangers posed by reckless and evasive driving. This bill is directly aligned with that work and those concerns. 553 increases penalties for willfully attempting to elude a law enforcement officer by increasing speed, extinguishing headlamps while still in motion, or abandoning a vehicle while being pursued. It also requires anyone that violates RSA 265-4 to have their license and driving privileges suspended for no less than 6 months and be sentenced to at least 5 consecutive days. The requirement for consecutive days is intentional. Too often, individuals are released too quickly and right back on the road, and they are already driving with a suspended license. This legislation was crafted to address true police pursuit situations and not inadvertently target drivers who may not immediately realize they are being pulled over. We have had a lot of pursuits in Keene. I have personally witnessed these pursuits. I've watched them fly by intersections, into rotaries, and too often it's our Keene police officers who are constantly dealing with this. Drivers who engage in pursuits can do so anywhere at any time, and they pose a serious safety risk to law enforcement, other drivers, pedestrians, and surrounding communities. Our officers are doing everything they can to help keep our roadways safe, so it is critical that we support them with clear, meaningful consequences that deter this dangerous behavior. I respectfully ask for you to support this public safety measure, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Senator. Do we have any questions? Seeing none, thank you for bringing the bill forward.
Thank you, sir.
From the Keene Police Department, Captain, I believe, Stephen Tenney, or did I give you a promotion? I'm not sure. Thank you for coming today, sir.
Thank you for having me, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Steve Tenney. I'm a captain. I've been a police officer for 27 years. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? All right. I've been a police officer in Keene for 27 years. My name is Steve Tenney. I'm a captain there. During that time, I've held positions as a patrol officer, patrol supervisor, K-9 handler, FTO officer, and currently I'm in charge of the field operations, which oversees all of our patrol operations. I approached Senator Fenton earlier this year, and I brought my concerns to him about how many pursuits we've had. Over the years, the number of our pursuits has gone up exponentially. The nature of these pursuits have become more dangerous. The distances traveled, the speeds, and the disregard for other motorists has really gotten bad. Concerning enough that these offenders think if they can leave the city of Keene, and more importantly, the state of New Hampshire, that they won't be held accountable for their actions. We noticed this trend during the pandemic, and then during some of the reform when we saw some Western states have no pursuit policies, and people thought that carried over to New Hampshire, which it didn't. And it became very dangerous. So, and we have, a lot of police departments have sensible pursuit policies all over the state. So even if we choose not to pursue an offender, once we initiate that motor vehicle stop, just their mere act of fleeing creates such a hazardous situation, especially during the daytime and on our highways. So I'm here today to ask for the change in the penalty and to support it from the Keene Police Department. We feel that this puts it in line with other penalties such as DWI subsequent offense, and it highlights the importance of how serious this is for the safety of others. The hope is if this bill passes or others that are like it, there'll be some education and maybe a media blitz so people know ahead of time to not even try to run from the police and put others at risk. I have submitted written testimony which has more detail. Please feel free to review it, and I welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. Thanks.
Welcome, Lieutenant. First of many times today, I think.
Senator, it's absolutely my pleasure. Rest of the committee. We are here today in support of Senate Bill 553. This legislation strengthens the penalties for individuals who disobey law enforcement officers and flee during a motor vehicle pursuit. It updates our RSA 265-4, a fleeing from an officer under subparagraph 1C. By increasing these penalties of loss of license period for not less than 6 months, and mandates a sentence for at least 5 consecutive days in the House of Corrections, which is not suspended or deferred. These changes reflect the serious offense and the dangers that pose to the public and law enforcement. I can tell you anecdotally, the New Hampshire State Police has seen a giant increase in police pursuits lately. We've seen over 123% increase since the year 2017. This trend underscores the urgent need for stringent deterrence. Pursuits are inherently dangerous, not only for officers involved, but also for the citizens of our state of New Hampshire. It also is very dangerous for anybody that is traveling our roadways. This bill establishes clear and elevated penalties based on the severity of the outcome. It sends a strong message that fleeing from law enforcement will not be tolerated here in New Hampshire. By enacting these changes, we create a strong deterrent to reduce pursuits, protect the lives of New Hampshire citizens, and safeguard the police officers that are out there doing this dangerous job. This bill is about saving lives and reducing unnecessary dangers on a road, and stronger penalties will help prevent these from happening. Thank you all.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We're all set. Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to speak on 553 who didn't sign in or otherwise would like to? Seeing none, thank you all for coming today. That ends the hearing on this bill. You chose the right seat.
Okay, good. Yeah, I don't like that. I'm short.
Give me a minute.
Okay. Good. How are you?
No, usually I'm fine. You tell me when.
It's a nationwide outage.
Welcome, Senator Rishardi. You're introducing 618 for Judiciary. Great to see you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I am Denise Rishardi, representing 12 beautiful towns in District 9. I'm here to discuss Senate Bill 618, of which I am the prime sponsor. I would like to begin by underlining why speeding is an issue which we, as public officials, need to take seriously. Extreme and repeat speeding is one of the most dangerous threats on our roadways, and the data tells us clearly that the problem is accelerating, not stabilizing. According to the Governor's Special Task Force on Highway Safety, New Hampshire has seen a 230% increase since 2018 in vehicles traveling well over 100 miles per hour, as observed by state police aircraft. This is not momentary inattention. This is deliberate, reckless behavior that puts lives at risk. Speeding remains a leading factor in our roughly 30,000 crashes statewide, and with people getting killed in speed-related crashes. Even more alarming, traffic deaths in our state rose nearly 50% between 2019 and 2022, despite fewer total crashes overall. When crashes happen today, they are more severe and more deadly, and it is because of speed. This trend is not unique to New Hampshire. Nationally, nearly 1/3 of all fatal traffic crashes involve speeding, and the economic cost of speed-related crashes in a single year has been estimated at nearly $59 billion. But while this is a national problem, the responsibility to act rests squarely with us at the state level. The hard truth is that our existing policy tools are failing to stop the most dangerous drivers. Fines can be paid and quickly forgotten. License suspensions are routinely ignored for repeat egregious speeders. Our current system treats reckless behavior as a temporary inconvenience rather than a serious public safety threat. I want to be clear about who this bill is not meant to target. Senate Bill 618 is not aimed at the average New Hampshire driver who occasionally exceeds the speed limit. This bill is intentionally focused on a small, high-risk group that has already demonstrated an unwillingness to drive responsibly. Given all this, I decided to file the bill to start the discussion on this topic. I listened to constituent after constituent who has been harmed or lost loved ones due to fatal speeding crashes. But in conversations with the Traffic Safety Commission, new things have been brought to light. And as much as I want to see this pass in the near future, I believe it should go to interim study. While I do believe in the goals of the legislation, it has become clear to me that the best vehicle for this is the Traffic Safety Commission. And I say this for several reasons. Respect for New Hampshire's culture of limited government, and New Hampshire has a long tradition of minimal government intrusion and careful deliberation before creating new penalties and enforcement mechanisms. We want to make sure our legislation fully conforms to New Hampshire's values with careful tailoring. Before creating a new category of enhanced speeding penalties, we want to spend more time with data on how the problem exists here in New Hampshire, allowing the legislation to be better focused on how super speeders are affecting New Hampshire. Specifically, the Traffic Safety Commission can analyze all of the crash data involving extreme speeding, enforcement patterns, highway design factors, comparative outcomes from other states, avoiding unintended consequences. Enhanced penalties can have ripple effects on the court and DMV workloads and law enforcement resources. Introducing a new penalty tier for super speeding could create inconsistencies unless carefully integrated into the existing New Hampshire's point system, fines, and administrative process. Building consensus in this committee before creating new penalties will help make major traffic changes to our law work best. And our laws work best when we have enforcement, safety advocates, courts, and the public are all aligned. The Traffic Safety Commission provides a forum where all stakeholders can weigh in, ensuring any final proposal has broad support and is practical to implement. Learning from other states like Georgia and North Carolina who have super speeder laws, but their traffic patterns, enforcement cultures, and penalty structures differ significantly from New Hampshire. The Traffic Safety Commission can study what worked and what didn't, and what we need to do to adapt this bill and make New Hampshire roads safer. A study referral to the Traffic Safety Commission demonstrates a commitment to good governance, public safety, and respect for New Hampshire's traditions, and will allow us to tackle this very serious problem as effectively as we can. And I hope that we will put this forward after I will say all the committee has studied everything and all the wrinkles have come out.
Thank you very much, Senator. Thank you for your wisdom to go slow. Senator, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question. On the first page of the bill, line 14, it says, it uses the term excessive speeding. Is that defined anywhere under rule or law already?
This is why it's going to the Traffic Study Commission, because the bill needs some work. It needs to be explicit on how many tickets, what the fine would be, the speed limit. And so I would ask you not really be as concerned with the underlying bill and wait till it comes out of the Traffic Safety Commission.
Thank you.
Senator Ridden, you all set? Okay, thank you very much for your testimony, Senator. Jeff Rogers. Good afternoon, guys. How you doing? If you can say with your names, who you are.
I am Jeff Rogers from Manchester.
Hi, I'm Paul Suska from Concord. We're both with the Bike Walk Alliance of New Hampshire.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senators, thank you for your attention today. On the back of the one-page handout that I believe you have in front of me is a photograph of me that was taken 24 hours after a crash that almost killed me in 2015. A passerby found me lying beside a road in Manchester with a reputation for frequent speeding. I was unconscious with a traumatic brain injury. I had fractures to my skull, my ribs, and my pelvis, which doctors will tell you taken together at the same time indicate a high-speed collision, but no vehicle remained behind. Doctors initially told my wife that I was unlikely to survive the weekend. I ask you to imagine what it's like to be told that after a search for your missing spouse has just ended with discovering them in a hospital bed, unconscious, bruised, with a brace around their head and tubes down their throat. That's what my wife was dealing with at that time. My traumatic brain injury led to a medically induced coma for 10 days, followed by 5 weeks in the hospital, during which time I had to relearn how to walk and how to feed myself. Followed by that, I was unemployed. I was out of work for 6 months while I was dealing with frequent speech, physical, and occupational therapy, along with visits to one of only 2 neuro-ophthalmologists in the state, located an hour away. My wife disrupted her job to drive me to those appointments. My own job at that time was managing teams of software engineers, mostly in Bedford with some overseas. My crash disrupted a planned visit to a trip to a team in Poland. My employer had to scramble to reassign people to cover my duties while also dealing with uncertainties regarding the duration of my recovery. Altogether, my medical and rehabilitation costs approached $500,000. The impact to my family was enormous, which led me to join victim advocate organization Families for Safe Streets, and it's why I strongly support Senate Bill 618. I believe that it will make the roads and streets safer for everyone in our state, which will make our state a better place to live and a more reliable place to do business. I think it will quite literally save lives. That's all for me.
All right, well, thank you.
That was a lot. Glad you're looking way better.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. As Mr. Rogers mentioned he's with Families for Safe Streets, and we're both with the Bike Walk Alliance of New Hampshire, which is New Hampshire's statewide education and advocacy organization. We promote safer conditions and practices for biking and walking in the state. I believe you already have the statistics on this epidemic of pedestrian deaths and other motor vehicle related deaths statewide. And it's clear that the current tools that law enforcement are using have not been effective at stemming the tide. We believe that this bill, would provide the Department of Safety with another important tool to protect the public from the most egregious speeders. I've seen some of the negative reaction to this bill on Facebook. Of course, Facebook now has become, all the objections that I've seen on Facebook are based on a misunderstanding of the bill, and an ignorance of the fact that it is limited just to the most egregious offenders. It actually provides more options for those offenders, in addition to them having the option of forfeiting their license temporarily, they could install this device. The ISA device is a proven technology. It's been used in commercial fleets for over 30 years. And using it is analogous to using ignition interlock devices for DWI offenses. So we hope that you'll move this bill forward to help stem the rising tide of traffic deaths. And if it is paused, then we look forward to helping to work out the details on the bill.
Great. I just missed your name when you said it.
Oh, Paul Suska.
Thank you very much.
I'm the board president at BWANH.
Do we have any questions? Again, it's great to see you doing. How you doing? Still
Today
well?
I'm good.
Today you're good. Well, it's good to see you. I'm glad you're in one piece. Sorry what you had to go through.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much for your testimony. Gary Catapano.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Senators. My name is Gary Catapano, and I'm a resident of New Hampshire. I live in Bow, and I'm the president of Safer First Consulting. I have 35 years of experience in the professional safety world, working with federal transportation agencies, fleets, municipalities, and governmental entities. I spent 4 years during the Obama administration as an advisor to FMCSA as part of their MCSAC committee. I have one of the last projects I am still somewhat involved in is helping New York City with the implementation of their ISA program. So I have a lot of experience and focus. I've spent the last 10 years of my career studying speeding. And I think I know I have an important message from you as to why in New Hampshire in particular, we are likely to see more and more acts of egregious speeding. And one of the best ways I can illustrate this to you, because I've studied this as well with my role and involvement in helping New York City. During the pandemic, as you may recall, when traffic was greatly reduced because of in effect, the quarantine that was in place and the ban on people going to and from work. One odd thing that we first started to see that speaks to how evil speeding is from a behavioral standpoint was a tremendous increase in speeding on the streets of New York. You might ask yourself, why did that happen? Well, part of it is obvious. The answer is that there was less congestion on the roadway. Part of it is the human behavioral side of this, and that speeding is a unique behavior that reinforces, in a counterintuitive way, it reinforces the consequences that a speeder receives from engaging in speeding, actually reinforce that behavior and make it likely that it's going to reoccur over and over and over again. So the positive consequences they get from speeding is what drives this. Now, there are 3 kinds of speeding behaviors that I've classified in the work that I've done. One is people who speed and they do it by making a mistake, perhaps because of inexperience or a new car they're driving. And that's not a serious thing, but it can be problematic. The second type of speeder is one, and this is the more common version that we see in a lot of people, when human beings lose their appreciation for how risky driving is because their experience of driving a modern automobile, and we knew this years ago, we knew this back in the 1960s, that humans react to their roadway experience by how comfortable they feel at the speed they're traveling, right? So it was actually Ralph Nader that suggested we introduce haptic vibration to the steering column when someone goes above a certain speed. That would tell them to slow down, right? But that doesn't happen. Modern car design works against us, and going 80 feels like it used to feel when you were going 35 miles an hour. In addition to that, the design of our roadways, and in particular here in New Hampshire, we have less congestion. We have roadways that are somewhat wide open at many times of the day, actually causes people to feel less risk. And those people, those third category of people that I didn't get a chance to describe to you, are the people that willfully speed in an egregious manner most of the time. And I've got tons of data on this because I've worked with large fleets and I get to see what type of drivers they have, even the ones with a good record. And I can tell you that even drivers with a good record speed 30 to 35% of the time. This bill is not about everyday drivers. It's about the people who have a flaw in their personality and their thinking that causes them to speed excessively. And they're the same people that don't wear their seatbelts and they don't care about their own safety. So they have no regard for the safety of the people they're sharing the roadway with. No one should have to pay a price for safe mobility on our roadways. And what I've seen from this technology, and I can give you the recent example in New York City that was reviewed by DOT Volpe, and they're expanding their ISA for their fleet of 31,000 vehicles, is that all speeding was cut back by 64%. But the truth is, when you look deeper into that report done by Volpe, you'll see that the ISA technology that was involved caused the driver to adhere to the speed limit 97.4% of the time. And typically what we see in fleets, and this would be true for any kind of a vehicle, and it's retrofittable technology, so it works in people's cars. If you had someone that was convicted of reckless driving or egregious speeding, it could be fitted to their vehicle, and it could be done in a way that if someone could not afford to pay for it, the way this bill proposal is written, it has considerations for that. So it's fair, it's equitable, and it would prevent, guaranteed, it would prevent that individual from being able to speed. So I speak, and based upon years of experience and working with this in a wide number of fleets and vehicles, this is something, particularly in the state of New Hampshire, with our roads and our traffic being what it is in a good way, we're likely to see the state police and other law enforcement on the roadways dealing with this nonsense that you and I know goes on every single day in our roadways. And we can do more to prevent the next tragedy on our roadways by giving this bill the serious consideration it deserves.
Thank you very much. Did you have anything you submitted?
I can certainly submit something, but I have not.
Okay,
No.
thank you. If you can. Yes, Senator Carson, go ahead. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon and welcome to Senate Judiciary. I just have a question. You talked a lot about information that you've collected. Have you seen trends among age groups as to, if you could describe an age group or give us numbers, is there one particular age group that tends to violate the law with speeding?
Okay, well, the answer is yes, and it's the younger driver, the teen drivers, of course, because they have no experience. They don't understand the consequences of operating a vehicle at a speed like that. But we also know there's a secondary group of people, and this isn't a gender-related comment, but we know they're typically male and between the ages of 25 and 44. But there are some, depending on whose data you look at, I've been a volunteer for the National Safety Council for 35 years. I'm still on their board of delegates, so I work very closely with them. But depending on whose data you look at, that could vary a little bit. But typically it's a male and it's in those age brackets.
Follow-up, Senator Carson, yes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Based on your expertise, I'm not sure if you're aware, here in New Hampshire, we have a graduated license for young people. They get a license at 16, but it's conditional. Do you think it would be appropriate as, I don't want to use the word punishment, but to say to a 16-year-old, if you do this, you will lose your license until the age of 21?
You know, funny thing, it's a great question. And funny thing about consequences, we know from the behavioral side, consequences that are immediate and certain have the greatest influence on behavior. If something is future and it's uncertain, it doesn't have the same influence. So let me give you an example. If every time someone drove a car, they got a ticket or got involved in a crash, I guarantee you we wouldn't have this problem. But enforcement does the law enforcement folks do a terrific job, but they can't spend all their time out on the roadway writing speeding tickets. So, and we certainly don't want people to get involved in crashes every time they speed, but that's the part that works against us in this equation, because they're speeding and they're getting rewarded in other ways, and that's what causes them to speed even more. So you can turn a casual speeder into an egregious speeder. But there are some people that have problematic personalities, that third group, and those are the ones that this bill is really focused on.
Thank you for that. I happen to live a lot. It's very easy access to Route 93, and traveling up from the town that I live in to here, I'm always on Route 93. And I'm concerned because it's winter right now, but it's going to start getting warmer in March, and the roads there's no snow, and what's going to happen is you're going to see the speeding really upkick again on Route 93. There's long stretches of just straightaways, and it's been my observation they're mostly young people, and I would say they're in beat up Hondas, and they race. They're racing each other down the road, and they're not being aware of the fact that, yeah, they may be having fun doing this, but they're putting everybody else in danger on the road because they're cutting people off and speeding. And I agree with your comment about law enforcement that, that they can't be everywhere. And by the time you can have another operator call in and say, hey, this is going on, they're long gone. And it's been my experience and my own observation that a lot of the kids that are doing this, some of them are from here, but a lot of them are from Massachusetts. And so once they cross the state line, there's really nothing we can do about it. But I'm wondering if you believe there should be an enhanced penalty for people that are racing each other down the highways.
Yeah, that falls into particularly the speeds are excessive. And, we all know there's a strong correlation between vehicle speed and the likelihood of a crash as well as the severity of a crash. So when I use excessive speed, for me is more than 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, but egregious speeding would be 25 to 35 miles an hour or more above the speed limit. So if you're asking me, go back to your original question about graduated licensing, I love training for younger people, particularly if it could be done with a simulator or in ways that can demonstrate the kind of harm you can create when you travel at a speed that's unsafe. I'm not sure the threat of a penalty would ultimately make a difference, but how we respond to the kind of events that occur, meaning what kind of consequences we deliver, is important. I mean, I just feel like law enforcement has better things to do than to police the roadways, and there aren't enough police officers. We need more of them. So tying them up on the roadway is important in one sense, but in a way it doesn't allow them to focus on things that perhaps are more important.
Last follow. My last question, sir, and you brought it up, training. Do you think it would be important to include additional training for the young people that are in driver's education? Because that's how a lot of our young people get their license. They go through the high schools or they go through a private organization, but requiring them to have additional training on the dangers of speeding.
That would be an absolute positive thing to do, would have a great influence. If you could do it with modern technology and driver simulators, that would be great. It's a shame that we lost over the years funding across many states for those types of programs, but they were highly effective.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Oh, Senator Rogers, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question. So I understand the excessive speeding. Someone's going 50 miles above the speed limit or over 100 miles an hour. No real excuse for that under any circumstance, but we have a habitual offender law already, and that requires, it's a 5-year look-back period for minor offenses, and you need 12 offenses. It can be a combination thereof, but that includes speeding. I'm looking at that because there's excessive speeding, but then there's also just someone that's speeding, and I presume that person, if they're speeding at a given time, they're doing it all the time. So would there be any comment or thought on how many speeding offenses, like minor speeding offenses, someone would have to perhaps fall under this? As it's written, it leaves it to the department to
Why don't,
define the rulemaking. I'm just wondering if there's any.
let me see if it's a great question. Let me answer it by explaining, and I don't like using this word accident because these crashes we're talking about are preventable and they're typically willful. In many cases, the person knew they were speeding. But safety is no accident, right? And if we're relying on laws to stop people from speeding, that's not going to work. You need to be able to deliver consequences through things like high visibility enforcement, more tickets, automated enforcement, or other programs such as this one that we're talking about to offer real deterrence. If law enforcement had more funding and they could be out there doing high visibility enforcement in a coordinated way with public information, that could be hugely impactful. But the state police and the local law enforcement agencies, they do a great job, but they don't have enough money to be able to do it the way it would make a meaningful difference. But I don't think changing the law is going to actually prevent a crash. Do you know what I mean?
Follow.
But what I'm trying to get to is if we're talking just about someone who's getting the minor citation of speeding, all right, how many of those offenses would it be appropriate before they would then fall under this program?
Well, that's a tough question to answer.
I was thinking 3.
I mean, it would be a low number, but also, I mean, I can tell you, I've seen the studies, I've worked with large fleets. The people that don't wear their seatbelts, if you pull someone over, if you're a law enforcement over and you pull someone over and not wearing their seatbelt, that tells you a lot about that individual. They're a risk taker, and those are the people that are typically prone to speeding. And I agree with you, the number should be towards the lower end rather than the higher end. I'll give you just one more brief story. So New York City has 2,000 speed cameras in place that are within 2 miles of speed zones. They have and those cameras is a $50 fine currently if you get ticketed for speeding in those zones. There are people, including city officials, that have been ticketed, some up to 250 times, and there's little or no deterrence in that. So we have to figure out a way, working with law enforcement, policy, setting laws, and using technology to pull ourselves together before we can make a real difference in the carnage that takes place on our highways every single day.
Thank you.
Wilson. Thank you very much for your testimony, sir. Kevin Grishon, that was close. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon, members of the Senate Judiciary. My name is Kevin Crishone. I live in Goffstown, and I strongly support SB 618. I wanted to come and give my perspective as a pedestrian, cyclist, driver, and resident of the Manchester area, which is a high-traffic area. Before moving to Goffstown, my partner and I lived for many years on the west side of Manchester, and during that time I experienced many close calls while driving and walking and biking in Manchester and on the surrounding highways. When people would ask me sometimes about crime in Manchester, I always said that, for the average person walking around, the real danger was not crime, it was speeding cars. And you can find data that backs this up, this general sentiment. In this 2024, according to state data about documented crimes, New Hampshire had 14 murders, and in that same year, 135 traffic fatalities. And in my experience, most drivers are responsible, but a small number of reckless drivers endanger everyone. They can take advantage of sometimes lenient consequences and the reality that police can't be everywhere at once. So for me, this is an issue of public safety. It's an issue of law and order. And if we just want fewer traffic deaths than the 137 that we saw across the state in 2025, there do need to be real consequences for excessive speeders, for super speeders, as they've been termed. Because at some point, we do have to ask ourselves for situations and trends in crime like this and public safety, why are we allowing people to repeatedly break the law and put others in harm's way? So SB 618 is a proven solution with bipartisan support. Others have spoken to that, and I encourage you to please vote for it and to support it and to vote for law and order. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for coming today. Appreciate taking the time. Does anyone else wish to testify on SB 618 who forgot to sign in or would like to say a few words? Seeing none, that'll end the hearing on SB 618. Yeah. She wants it. Yep. No, you brought that up. Six one eight.
This time, we will now open the public hearing on Senate Bill 620, and I recognize Senator Gannon to introduce the bill.
Thank you very much, Senator Abbas. I am Senator Bill Gannon from District 23, commonly known as the Wine District of New Hampshire. You're going to get used to that, I'm telling you. Anyways, I've been working on similar bills the last couple of years, and I have failed. So mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. Is that Jimmy Buffett's line? Anyways, I've failed at it. So luckily this year, we had the Governor's Highway Safety Task Force, and I got to sit next to a lot of people behind me, but three in particular, Steve Pecora, Eddie Edwards, and Lieutenant Storm, who have vast knowledge and way more experience than I do. I'm a jack of all trades, but they're a master at their fields. And so what we've found, I've tried the last few years, I go over to the House, and I fail. And it's the refusal rate. Right now in New Hampshire, we have about 75% non-compliance rate with people taking the breathalyzer. Other states are totally opposite. They're 25% refuse to take. So the problem is our death rates are up. And we can't let this stand. So I had a bill, and it wasn't quite ready for prime time when I filed it, but we had a deadline. So I got it in knowing that I could go to these individuals behind me and get their advice on what would work. So we want people to take this. So we want them to take it so that people who are drinking excessively know they shouldn't be, know that most people, I talked to a bunch of people at a Republican caucus last night in one of my towns, and I said, how many of you would take the breathalyzer? And they're like, oh no, a good lawyer will get us off. So when the people think that they shouldn't take it, it's not good. So I talked to these individuals I've mentioned and others, and I said, what can we do to get people to take it? I said, you know, and so we thought about it and we said, well, the people right now aren't taking it because if you took it and you had an excessively high breathalyzer rate, you could be penalized more by taking the breathalyzer right now and lose rather than just not taking anything and you lose it for a certain 3 months and you'd be all set, but you could have an excessive higher number, so you're incentivized not to take it. So we want people to take this breathalyzer. We want them, if you have a drinking problem, to go get counseling and to realize you have a problem and not drink and drive on our streets. So we've come up with an idea that if you refuse to take it, so when you get your license at the beginning, it's a privilege to have your license, and you're really entering into a contract. You're entering into contract that if you are drinking and drinking, you will, and you're driving, you're subject to either a breathalyzer test, a blood test, or urinalysis test. If you refuse, so you have agreed to do that. Now you're saying on the road when you've been stopped by a police officer and he believes that you've had too much to drink, you're now not fulfilling your part of the contract. So then you'll lose your right to drive for a 12-month period. Now we need an incentive. We want the people, we want you to want to take that breathalyzer test, show you're innocent, hopefully. But if not, if you're willing to take it and say you read 0.085, you're just a little bit over, but you took that test, we're going to say thank you for taking it, and we're going to leave it to the discretion of the judge to decide if should we reward this behavior. You're complying, and we'll help you out, and you'll have a lighter sentence. So we want you to take it. It's an administrative, you're going to administratively be found guilty if you don't take it, but if you cooperate, you'll sort of have a carrot. So that's where we're going. The people behind me will explain it in non-lay terms, and I think do a much better job. But we want people in our roads to be safer. We want people to take that test. I would like it flipped around, so 25% of the people are refusing and not 75%. It correlates with other states. They have safer roads, they have less deaths, and we want to see that. We don't want New Hampshire leading in a category that's totally bad. Deaths on the road and lack of people taking the exam. I think the officer, Eddie Edwards, Lieutenant Storm, and they can go into more detail, and I think they'd answer your questions better than I, but if you have any questions of me, shoot. Seeing none? Thank you. Thank you.
This time, we'll recognize Eddie Edwards.
Gentlemen, you know what I see when I see the three of you walk up here? I see the big three, Byrd, McHale, and Parrish. Big three on public safety.
Senator, I take that as an absolute compliment.
Okay. Unless you're a New York fan or something, I'm doing good.
Now, if they only got the kind of money that they got, then I can guarantee you wouldn't be sitting here.
Yes.
Have you help us with that?
So I hope I didn't dig a hole for you and you have to dig your way out if I explain things poorly.
No, it was great.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Senate President, honorable committee members. For the record, my name is Eddie Edwards, Assistant Commissioner, Department of Safety, and Chair of the Traffic Safety Commission. To my left is Lieutenant Christopher Storm, New Hampshire State Police. To his left is Attorney Ryan McFarland, who is the Bureau Chief of Hearings for the Department of Safety. I want to begin our testimony today. You're going to hear three different points that we would make as a department. One is why this legislation is important, how the laws are enforced, and how the ALS is carried out in our state. We will be brief in our testimony, so we make sure we have time to answer your questions. I'd like to begin my testimony by looking back and reflecting upon the work that was done in 2025. In April 2025, Governor Kelly Ayotte stood up the Special Traffic Safety Task Force on Highway Safety. That task force was chaired by the Attorney General, John Pamela, and co-chaired by Bob Quinn, the Commissioner of Safety. There were a number of different voices on that special task force, and we've heard from many of your colleagues in the Senate and House and people across the state. And one of the recommendations made was to strengthen our implied consent laws. This is a priority for the governor. It's one of her top priorities, as a matter of fact, for the state. This priority of the governors and the task force and at the Department of Safety aligns with the expectations of the general public. The general public has an expectation that their loved ones, when they leave their house in the morning to go to work, will come home in the afternoon, that their lives will not be taken at the hands of a drug or drunk driver. Parents have that expectation for their young people. Then when they go off, and that teenager has their first license, and they go off, they come back home, that they're going to come back home to them and not lose their life at the hands of a drug or drunk driver. This is important because our public policy has to be strengthened to match the enormous resource that the state of New Hampshire puts into preventing drug and drunk driving every year. Currently, we're spending roughly $3 million on enforcement through the Office of Highway Safety for enforcement and equipment for police officers. Not to mention the number of cases, the arrests, the prosecutions, the trainings. Equally important, we have 71 specialized officers who are trained across the state of New Hampshire to detect drug driving. Now, this is shocking because Vermont, a similar state, similar size, had over 400 evaluations last year. New Hampshire had 100. The number of, we have 3 scientists in our crime lab who are focused on this issue, servicing 132 intoxicological machines across the state. That's roughly nearly $300,000 the state spends on that. So when you add up the cost and the toll that New Hampshire has for impaired driving, it's enormous. Not to mention the unmeasurable cost for families who lost loved ones. This is a public policy issue that must match our investment and the public's expectation. Right now, this is a behavioral choice. It's a behavioral choice. It's not an attack on freedom. In fact, responsibility is the underpinning of freedom. It's not an attack on liberty. Accountability is not the enemy of liberty. In fact, it's our foundation for our state. And so we would ask the Senate to support this public policy and send a very clear message to motorists, to visitors to our state, that New Hampshire will not tolerate drug and drunk driving on our highways because it's 100% preventable. Every crash, every fatality due to drugs and drunk driving is 100% preventable. So with that, I'll end my testimony and turn it over to Lieutenant Chris Storm.
Thank you, Commissioner. As you guys have heard, our state is really bad when it comes to refusal. We are at almost 70%. compared to a national average of 24%. So we're almost 3 times as bad. We need to make sure that we strengthen this. This 180 days that we currently have for refusal does not match, and it shouldn't match for if you take the test. It is the exact same penalty for whether you take it or you don't take it. And we need to strengthen that for a plethora of different reasons. I can tell you right now, our neighboring state, Vermont, has a 14% refusal, and the state of Maine has a 16% refusal rate. We're really bad. ALS is one of the most effective countermeasures, and that comes from NHTSA. There's multiple studies on it that is one of the most effective countermeasures to impaired driving. We have plenty of studies, and we can share them with the committee, and also within our written testimony, we'll have plenty of that information so that you all will be able to read that. The next thing that we need to do is we just need to strengthen this for both the first refusal and subsequent refusals. Our ask is to make that first refusal a year and that subsequent refusal 3 years. The other big pieces to this is we understand that right now our current law says that if you take a test and you blow over twice the legal limit, for cooperating with the police, you will have to go to jail for 17 days. We think that that should be at the discretion of a judge. That shouldn't be in the law. It should be at the discretion of the judge so that they can make that decision. And they will still be in there. They can still send them to jail because it's a Class A misdemeanor. But they should have that discretion whether they send them to jail or not, because that individual cooperated with the police. That is a big piece to this as well. It also helps with the treatment part of it. It requires them the IDCMP program, making sure they have a service plan, and it also comes with that alcohol interlock. The strengths of SB 620, it's a deterrent. Longer certain suspensions makes refusal. That makes it a losing strategy for those individuals that all think that they should just refuse and then get some kind of lower penalty or some kind of reduction. Again, as the commissioner said, it comes to that accountability. Our highest risk offenders face consequences while engaging in rehabilitation and making sure that there is no recidivism, to make sure that they aren't doing this again. We ask you, and I can tell you from law enforcement, we ask you and we plead with you to make this an ought to pass and to pass this, to strengthen this, so the men and women that are out there in law enforcement have some strength behind making and keeping our roads safe. I'll turn this over to Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Ryan McFarland, the administrator of the Bureau of Hearings. I've been an attorney for over 20 years dealing with criminal, motor vehicle, and administrative law. I oversee the Bureau of Hearings at this point. I'd like to talk just briefly about how this law will close a loophole in the current law and also deal with fairness with the criminal aspects. Currently, there's a loophole is if somebody refuses a test here in New Hampshire, we only look back to see if they have a prior DWIs or other administrative action in the state of New Hampshire. So if an individual in 2024 gets a DWI conviction in one of our neighboring states, Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts, and in 2025 they get another DWI here in New Hampshire, we do not count that prior DWI out-of-state conviction currently for an enhanced administrative penalty. They would still get the first offense 6 months suspension. So that is a massive loophole. We have individuals with multiple out-of-state convictions, multiple out-of-state administrative suspensions that we do not consider under the current law that we have now. So it is important to close that loophole. So you have individuals who are in bordering states, they get DWI in Methuen, Massachusetts, they get a DWI in Salem, New Hampshire, who are not being treated effectively getting the help they need with this loophole that we currently have. Also, the lieutenant touched on it briefly, but it's also the fairness aspect. An individual who submits to the testing, does everything we've asked them to do, has upheld that contract that you talked about, Chairman, of taking the test. They take the test, they're over a 0.16 or greater. Right now, they have to, it's a mandatory 5 consecutive days in jail that they have to serve. Whereas an individual who a highly trained trooper or officer out there can look at an individual and say, this individual is clearly above a 0.16. They refuse everything. They go to court, even if they're found guilty of that DWI, they're going to get they're probably going to get the mandatory minimums, penalties for DWI first offense, where there's no possibility of jail time, no possibility of the interlock. It's just a fine and a loss of license. In the treatment program. So it's important we incentivize people to take the test, not make it worse for an individual who takes the test and then has to serve jail time as part of their cooperation with the state. So I think it's very important we close that loophole and we make this fair for everybody who drives on our ways and makes it safer. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll direct this to anyone who can answer it. If you have a CDL license and you refuse the breath test, what is the suspension of the CDL? I know that's different than your typical license.
For a first time, it's a 1 year disqualification is how they call it, disqualification for a CDL for the first offense. For a subsequent offense, it's a lifetime disqualification, and they can request to be restored after 10 years if they meet certain conditions under the rules.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? Just because I don't know and I should. I've never talked with you guys about Cinderella licenses. So if you got it 3 months, can they let you go to work? Can they do something like that? Does it exist on the books? And I'm dimly aware of it.
There is a limited license in New Hampshire. It has to be a first and only true first offense. New Hampshire has to be ordered by the court. The individual has to serve a 45-day portion of that suspension, court suspension. If there is an administrative penalty on the book suspension, that they're not eligible for this limited license under the current statute and rules. They also have to install an interlock device for the period of time they're as part of the limited license, and also a year after they have full restoration, they're subject to the interlock requirement.
Thank you. Senator Carson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, gentlemen. My question is kind of related to the prior bill that we had, and I was asking about young people. And quite frankly, a lot of kids, when they get into car accidents, they've been speeding. And the first question is, if you suspect that these young people, they're underage, do you automatically administer a test, or do you need to get parental permission to do that?
So, Senator, once you're 16, you fall under all the rules of an adult when it comes to driving.
Okay.
So as soon as they're arrested, they would be going through the same process that the adult goes through.
Okay. May I follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Follow up.
So if you had someone who was, say, 17, and they're still under the graduated license, they would lose their license for 9 months. Is that correct, according to this?
They would actually lose their license longer because they're under that law that you're speaking of that we worked on last session.
Okay.
There is an enhanced license loss for those individuals that are under that for major motor vehicle offenses.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because it is, we do separate them out and treat them very, very differently. And in my opinion anyway, the sooner we can correct bad behavior, the better off it is for them, or quite frankly, for everyone, that hopefully they'll learn and won't offend again. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Senator Carson, I don't know, did you see, I have SB, I didn't mention it, 620, I have an amendment.
You've got it to 12
changing
months?
it to 12 months.
So may I ask them a question?
Yes.
So are you in support of the 12 months?
100%.
100%.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Senator Reardon, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr.
You're
Chairman.
way over there and I miss you sometimes.
Thank you for taking my question, and I'm not sure who can answer this. And it's about a little bit of curiosity about how we got here. How is it that most people you ask about taking a breathalyzer, and I don't know if this is being decided on the side of the road when somebody's been stopped, but will say, and it's the culture here in New Hampshire, you never take the breathalyzer. And if we in fact do change this law, I'm not sure it's you on the side of the road saying, hey, new law, if you take this, or the person's in receiving mode for that information. What do we do about, if we do this, about making sure that that message is received that now you take the breathalyzer?
That's a fantastic question. And the answer to that question is The reason why that people aren't taking the test is it mirrors the same thing. It's the same penalty whether you take the test or you don't take the test. So there's no incentive to say, I'll take that test. And the second part of the question is that comes through the administrative license suspension form, which is called the ALS form, that once that person is arrested, we read that to them post-arrest. And that lays out what is supposed to happen and what those penalties are. And we are currently at the Department of Safety working on that particular form and to actually make that form better and more understandable for individuals.
Okay, well, can I just follow up
Yep.
on that? So we're assuming that New Hampshire people who drink and drive actually know what the law is, or they just know that message? Do they know it's the same penalty in both cases, or have they just been told by everybody, you never take the breathalyzer?
I'll talk about the education.
The answer is I think it's become a cultural thing. I think it's something that has just precipitated itself over these many, many years because it has been the same exact thing for that many years.
But keep in mind, Senator, if this law passes, which we hope it will, we will continue to put an enormous amount of resources on educating the public, as we're doing now, about the responsibility of driving responsible in the state. Again, this is a behavioral choice, so we feel that more the people are aware of the consequences for their behavioral choices, that they would make informed choices, and the state will continue to provide that knowledge and education, particularly behind this bill, that the new sanction is a year if you personally choose not to comply, and it's a different penalty, no jail time if you comply, particularly if you're twice the legal limit.
Great,
This will be over to the judge.
So Lieutenant Storm, if this passes and goes through and gets signed, I'll see you explaining this to everyone on TV, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you. Senator Carson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have hopefully just a quick question, and it's about consent. If you know someone or suspect someone is intoxicated or drugged, can they legally give consent, knowing that you know that they're not, they're intoxicated or whatever?
Yes, they can.
They can. Is that, may I follow, Mr.?
Yes, follow.
So that is established, an established precedent? Is it in rules, or do we need to do something in here?
I'll let our traffic safety resource prosecutor will be coming up and she will absolutely be able to answer that question
Okay.
for you.
So it's a mens rea question, huh?
Yeah, whether or not you're
Yeah.
capable of
Okay.
giving consent.
Go ahead, Senator Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, please correct me if I'm wrong about this. This is the process. So when someone's arrested, now at the station, and before the test is administered, they're given a form, either one, even though they already consented to the test when they got their license, they're now consenting again, that they're going to do it. But at that moment in time is when it's disclosed what the penalty, not penalty, but what the administrative suspension would be
Yes, sir.
if they were to not take the test.
Correct.
And it's also in writing on the form.
It is.
Thank you.
No, sir.
All set? We are finally all set. Thank you guys for all your good testimony. Appreciate it.
I'll submit our written testimony as well.
Thank you both, all three of you. Is that Colonel?
Colonel Jordan?
Is it Colonel Jordan?
Kind of looks like Jordan.
What do you think, Daryl? Colonel?
I don't believe they want to testify.
Oh, okay.
Speaking of
I'm sorry. I was looking at the name. Anyways, Attorney Robert Moses, come on down. Good to see you, sir.
Famous words of Yogi Berra, this is deja vu all over again.
There you go.
My name is Attorney Robert Moses. I practice out of an office in Amherst, New Hampshire, and do a significant number of these DWI cases every year. This is the third time I've had the pleasure of appearing before a legislative body. The first time was the House, and the last two times was here before this committee. And I'm still, based on my recollection of Senator Gannon's last greeting when I was here, I'm still trying to let my people go.
There you go.
If I might digress just momentarily, because Senator Abbas brought up the issue of CDL. There are right now statistically somewhere between 29,000 and 32,000 CDL license holders in New Hampshire. They are subject to some very severe penalties against their CDL licenses, most of whom rely upon that for their employment. And the problem with implied consent as it relates to CDL drivers is that when they are in a private vehicle and not driving a commercial vehicle, and they are arrested for driving while intoxicated, the so-called DSMV 426 form, which is the form that we're all used to and probably have all seen, that outlines the penalties associated with a refusal. The problem is that there's not a single word on that form that covers a commercial driver license. So a commercial driver might very well say, for whatever reason he refuses, and reads the back of the form, which the police are not obligated to show them, by the way, before they make a decision, which is also a flaw. There's nothing there that suggests or indicates at all that the CDL will be impacted whatsoever, never mind for a whole year. And in the case of commercial drivers, and I've represented many, many of them, they have consistently said, if I had known that, I would have taken the test. I could live with the 6 months. My employer understands. They've found something else for me to do. A year, I'm out of a job. And now I can't pay my mortgage. I can't do what I need to do to support my family. If I had known, then I would have blown, quite simply. There's no reason why such a warning cannot be placed on that form. There are a number of states that have forms, implied consent rights forms, that very clearly indicate penalties. For example, if someone is under 21, if someone is a CDL holder, and other factors. It would not require a very significant change in the form. It would require maybe a paragraph. So with that said, obviously I'm happy to take any questions at any time that, during the course of our discussion. But I think that's something that the committee and the legislature in general really needs to be mindful of. And I know that I've heard from at various levels over at the Department of Safety, yeah, we're working on it. Well, it took them 11 years to get regulations done for an interlock device. And so you'll excuse me if I'm not overly optimistic about that happening unless there's some legislative, shall we say, nudging. As far as the refusal situation is concerned, Senator, Mr. Chairman, you indicated that people do not comply. The fact of the matter is, our Supreme Court has said that people do not have to use your word, comply. They don't have to take the test. Mm-hmm. There's a case that goes all the way back to 1985, and it's State versus Cormier. And I have citations if anybody wants it. I don't want to turn this into a legislative classroom, but there is a case from 1985. It's called State versus Cormier, which says that a person does have a right to refuse, but there are strings attached. And the strings that are attached is the implied consent law, which is what we're talking about now. Similarly, about 11 years or 12 years later, State versus Parker, judges are required, in the case of a refusal in a trial before a jury, and of course they're supposed to consider it themselves on a bench trial, they are required to instruct the jury as a matter of law that in the event that an explanation has been given as to why a person refused, the jury needs to consider that in determining whether the refusal was consciousness of guilt or there was some other reason. For example, just to give you an example, there are people who have what's called a vagus reflex, and they get nauseous at the sight of needles, and so they refuse. There are a couple of departments, believe it or not, and I do have the benefit of being on the street. That's one thing I do have a benefit of that I can bring before the committee, because I deal with these folks all the time, and I deal with police departments all the time. And there are a couple of departments that actually have phlebotomists come to the police departments to draw blood, or at least potentially. And people have obviously said to me, hey, I'm not gonna have someone draw blood in a semi-dirty police department. I'm not gonna take that chance. And yet that goes down as a refusal. People do have reasons why they don't want to take it. Sometimes they don't take it because the police officer has treated the guy poorly. And the driver says, you know what? You're not treating me very well. I'm not doing anything for you. Does that mean he's worried about not passing the test? No, it means that he's reacting to an uncomfortable situation. Certainly there are people who don't want to take the test because if you go to the IDCMP, the alcohol program, the biggest lesson that comes out of there is don't ever take the test again. And that's what everybody talks about. How do you know that? And a client will say to me, because when I got my first one, I went to the IDCMP, and if I came away with nothing else, it was don't do field sobriety tests, don't take the test. I would respectfully suggest, again, as I did before, that we also have a situation. I know the last time we had this go around, the last time it was a year on the first refusal. That's now been reduced to 9 months. Under current law, it's 6 months. And I was concerned at that time and remain concerned that the remedial aspect of the implied consent law is very quickly approaching one which is penal. And when that happens, administratively, there's a loss of jurisdiction. Because if something is sufficiently punitive, then it runs up against the Eighth Amendment, and then you have a problem where you're going to have to deal with it judicially. And that leads me, and by the way, increasing the second refusal to 3 years, which is identical to the loss of license on a second offense conviction, that very clearly signals confrontation with the Eighth Amendment. When the penalties are exactly the same and one is criminal, there's no way the other one can be administrative or remedial for that matter, even if they don't run together, which they don't in the case of refusal. So that just brings me to the last point. I don't want to take any more time than you think I should have. I would ask the committee to perhaps give some thought while pondering this rather complicated implied consent issue to consider doing what a tremendous number of other states have done, and those are the states that have very low rates of refusal. The reason is that those states do not treat refusals administratively. They treat them criminally. It is a separate charge. You're being charged with driving under the influence. You're being charged with refusing to submit to a chemical test. The DMV can still suspend the way they do now, but upon proper notice, it would be for a court to essentially conduct an ALS hearing. Now, circuit court judges are going to be loath to embrace that with open arms, but it is something to be considered. And if there's a conviction, then criminal penalties can be imposed up to and including incarceration for a refusal, which cannot be done now, either in court or at the DMV. So to use the very diplomatic term incentivize, which is more of a nice way of saying cattle prod, if you want people to not refuse, and I'm sort of arguing against what I do, but I'm just suggesting that if this bill passes, I know that one of the first things I'm going to do is challenge it as being punitive and not remedial. And if that challenge happens to be successful, then there's going to be a lot of thought and work that's going to go for nothing. There's just a better way to deal with it, criminalize it. And then you have a trial and you deal with the two things, and you can still use the refusal. 265A10 says you can use the refusal at trial. And the form says if you refuse, your refusal can be presented to the court at the time of your trial. You can keep all that, but let the adjudication be based on a burden of proof other than what it is now. And I have said somewhat tongue-in-cheek that the burden of proof at the DMV right now is so low that I would be surprised if the Geico Gecko could slide under that pole. It's extremely low. And consequently, despite the fact that it's called a due process hearing and fundamentally fair, or supposed to be, the reality is it's not. Is it going to take a lot of business away from the DMV? Yeah, it could. But in the end, what we're trying to do is justice, whether it is on the administrative level or on the criminal level. And not everybody, incidentally, who gets arrested for DWI has a problem. There are a lot of one-time offenders, a lot of people who celebrate a business merger that one night, they're 0.10 or 0.11 or 0.12. They're 60 years old and they've never even had a parking ticket. And yet they're labeled as having a problem and told that they have to take accountability. To me, I understand what I do for a living. I understand I'm on the dark side, as the folks like to call it. But justice still needs to prevail, and that's the most important thing. Unless there are any questions, I appreciate your taking time to listen to me.
Just a comment on what you just said. I'm that guy in a 63, maybe I have that one night, but that's the one night it could take someone's life too, right? Just one.
No question. No question. And so can some 85-year-old octogenarian in a Subaru who shouldn't be on the road.
Senator Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question. You mentioned some
My
other
pleasure.
states or jurisdictions have a law where it's a criminal offense to refuse to take the breathalyzer.
Yes.
Have any of those laws ever been constitutionally challenged? 'Cause to me, it seems
I'm unaware.
compelling someone to submit potentially incriminating evidence or face a criminal penalty may run to the self-incrimination.
I'm not aware, and these laws have been on the books for quite a while. I'm the first to admit that I have not jumped into the deep end of the pool and searched out, although I would be happy to do it if it helps the committee. But I know they've been on the books for a long time, and I'm not aware of any challenges, and I'm not sure that it will run into any kind of a constitutional issue because the ability to refuse is something granted by the legislature. And it's a statute, and it can be included in the motor vehicle code. If you can put in the motor vehicle code, we can use your refusal against you in court, as it is right now. Penalizing someone for that very same refusal, it certainly isn't double jeopardy, and it's something that could be adjudicated concurrently with the DWI. And someone could be found guilty of refusing, and their license could be suspended, but not guilty of the DWI. The way things are right now, if you're found not guilty of the DWI, you're scot-free, but for whatever administrative sanctions may have been imposed.
Well, you suggested that if we were to increase the administrative suspension to 12 months, you feel that that's punitive. I guess my question is, it's something that every driver who has a New Hampshire license agreed to do when they get their license. And if they don't, I know you don't like the word comply, but then they don't submit to the test that they previously agreed to take. Why is it punitive if their license is suspended for 12 months but not 6?
Well, it's now, the bill as it presently stands is 9 months, as I understand it.
9 months or 6, either way.
Well, I think, I frankly, and anyone who knows me will tell you that you know where I'm coming from all the time. The 9 months struck me when I first saw the proposed bill. That sort of struck me as, well, okay, we really want to do a year, but it may be a problem constitutionally. 6 months isn't enough. So let's try 9 months, and maybe that'll go right up to the edge, but maybe it won't cross it into an area where you run into a constitutional problem. It's true that you impliedly consent when you get your license. There's no argument there. But as the Cormier case says, and as the Parker case says, the driver, notwithstanding his implied obligation, is given an escape valve, if you want to call it that. And so he's not, the only other thing you can really do, some of the Western states like Wyoming, for example, they do warrants, they do blood warrants. And so they don't worry about a refusal because there aren't any. But then you're going to run into some, that may be okay for out west. I'm not sure it's going to fly that well here. But, the legislature and the case law has given people the option, but with consequences. And those consequences are what you folks are addressing in the new implied consent law.
Well, I I appreciate that, but I guess if you find that the license is being suspended is punitive, why isn't 6 months, in your opinion, punitive, but 9 months or 12 months perhaps is?
Well, it's a good question. I don't, I mean, if you're not going to suspend at all for a refusal, obviously that makes the whole exercise pointless. The law is not exact, the law is very fluid. And so, you know, at what point a court is likely to determine that the line from remedial to punitive has been crossed is not a static, bright line rule. And it takes some ability to persuade a court to cross that line to punitive from remedial. And the public policy of keeping impaired drivers off the road tends to make the ability to make that argument much more difficult unless and until it gets to the point where some court of appeal in all probability is going to say, well, now, wait a minute. That's a little much, okay? We understand the public policy. We understand the goal. We understand what the legislature in that particular state has tried to accomplish. But we see this as being just a little bit too much, and therefore it's become punitive. What that line is, I mean, someone could make the argument about 6 months. I don't think it would pass muster before a court.
You all set? Okay. Follow up, Senator.
So if it was no suspension, it would be pointless. I agree. Because why take it, right?
Right, why bother?
If 6 months is not punitive or it's not going to cause a legal problem in the higher courts. But we have the highest refusal rate in the country. And the whole point clearly is that people are, you want people to take the test. That's why you have 6 months as a administrative suspension. I mean, that's what I said your answer to be the last question. So I guess if we were to increase it to a higher amount, what should that amount be? Because 6 months is clearly not getting anything.
I think for clarification purposes, I think what I'm trying to say anyway, perhaps inarticulately, is that we or I or we as attorneys who are looking at these statutes, one of the things we do, at least I do, is I tend to look at it in the case of a situation where do I challenge this or do I not? And that usually comes down to having had the experience of a number of years, and whether or not I may think it's punitive at 6 months, but I have to look at it from the standpoint of what is a judicial panel going to think of it, and based on precedent, what is the likelihood of success? Because I not only have an ethical obligation, but quite frankly, personally, I'm not going to challenge a statute just because I don't like it when I know that the likelihood of success is at best minimal and probably less than that. Now, for example, the end of this month, I have an oral argument in Sullivan County Superior Court with my learned colleague, Attorney McFarland back here, who surprisingly does not agree with my position. And we're going to be arguing whether or not commercial driver license penalties for an ALS refusal is a direct consequence of the refusal or an indirect or collateral consequence. Because if it's direct and it's not spelled out on the form, then the state has a problem. If the court finds that it's collateral, then the warning doesn't have to be given. And of course, not unexpectedly, the only other two cases that I'm aware of, both were mine, in Superior Court. One judge has said it's direct, another judge has said it's collateral. So circling back to what you were addressing, that's what we look at when we decide or try to decide intelligently whether or not a challenge is appropriate. I mean, ethically, first and foremost for me. And secondly, the obligation to my clients.
We're good. Thank you for putting up with us for
Yep, no, not at all. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney Moses. Alexandra Morel. Do you know her? I like her.
Yeah.
I knew you don't. You
Yeah, I
her?
know who she is. We've talked.
I figured you
We've
had somewhere.
talked.
Ms. Morel, welcome. Good to see you again.
Good afternoon. Hopefully I'll be able to clarify some issues.
I bet you will.
So good afternoon, committee members. I first want to state kind of who I am so that you know where this information is coming from, and then I'll actually direct you to some of the documents that I handed up. So I am New Hampshire's Traffic Safety Resource Prosecutor. It's a position that NHTSA has created and they try to establish in all 50 states so that the Traffic Safety Resource Prosecutor can help law enforcement, prosecutors, legislators, judges, and the public with their specific needs. I'm also an Assistant Attorney General at the New Hampshire Department of Justice. So I have a unique perspective of not only training, looking at legislation, but actually handling my own cases. And prior to all of that, I was a public defender for over 10 years. So when I come with these answers and these facts, it's based on my experience. And I also cited case law or statutes just to make sure that we can make sure the record is clear. So the first thing I want to point out is that SB 620 is about the administrative license suspension. It's not about criminalizing a refusal. Historically, states have gone back and forth between whether they were going to criminalize or not, but they always had the implied consent under the administrative laws. Unfortunately, there are 2 states that I believe that have withdrawn their implied consent laws, and I believe Wyoming is one that chose to do the warrants instead. Otherwise, all the remaining states do have an implied consent law in effect, and that is for the administrative license suspension. There are no states, and I will be able to provide a list of statutes if you want, much like what is on page 3, where I can directly link you to the statute that would show if it was a criminal punishment or administrative. All of the statutes that are listed on page 3 are only an administrative license suspension. I also want to point out that New Hampshire, for a while, the Traffic Safety Resource Prosecutor position was empty. Now that I've taken this position over the past year, I've tried to make sure I go to conferences, network with national partners, try to receive funding from federal government. And when I go to these conferences, unfortunately, New Hampshire is often listed in the bottom of many categories. We are the second worst state when it comes to refusals. It is currently between 69 to 70%. The only state that is worse is Rhode Island, and that's at 71, 72%. So out of the entire country, we are the safest and the healthiest in many ways. But then when it comes to road safety, where it can impact anybody, a child walking to school, a parent sitting in their own house could get affected by an impaired driver, we are doing horribly. And it's important to note, once again, this isn't about the criminalization. It's saying that if you do not provide a sample, that your license, which is a privilege, will be suspended. I think earlier a lot of testimony kept mentioning found guilty, found guilty. You're only found guilty in the criminal court. Its suspension is sustained whenever you are in the administrative proceeding. I want to point out on page 3 is that list of states. Those are 30 states who have an administrative license suspension that is at least 12 months. Some use the term 1 year, some use the word 12 months, but all 30 of those states have at least a 12-month loss of license administratively. And so when there's this question of sufficiently punitive, constitutional problem, the amendment to now make ours 12 months puts us in a line with 30 other states. So I'm unsure how there's going to be this challenge that moving it to 12 months is now unconstitutional. Like I said, driving is a privilege. And so in order to make sure that people adhere to what they've agreed to when they go on the roadways of New Hampshire, we are making sure that the increased punishment deters individuals from refusing. I also just want to point out real quick, when we talk about length of license suspension, a lot of times numbers are just kind of flying everywhere and it's kind of hard to kind of conceptualize. administrative versus what's happening in the criminal court. And I believe earlier there was a question about whether people know or don't know what to do. When an individual is charged with a DWI, if they were to be convicted of their first offense, their license suspension is going to be 9 months. And so right now, if you refuse, you're only at 180 days. So you know you're going to get a lesser punishment. And there's enhancements for if somebody was 21. I have everything listed, but if you notice, all license revocations, if you are convicted criminally, are longer than the administrative license suspension. So that teaches you not to consent to testing, despite the consent that you agreed to under our implied consent laws. Also, I want to point out that for people that are habitual offenders or repeat offenders, subsequent offenses, they're looking at possibly 18-month loss of license. They're going to refuse and do the 180 days, and that's actually going to hide the conviction. So the third or fourth time they're now arrested for a DWI, they're not getting those enhanced penalties that should be coming with the DWI subsequence. So we're not addressing their needs. What this bill does do is that if somebody does blow over 0.16, so we're not talking about the individual that just had one drink and isn't used to drinking, but you blew a very high number, that the judge can say, you know what, I'm going to actually suspend or defer the mandatory sentence that would require jail time as long as you go do the treatment. And it's not forcing somebody to do treatment. They go to an evaluation first, and then if necessary, they'll go into a treatment plan under the IDCMP program, which New Hampshire has made new changes to make sure that that's addressing our needs here in state. Sorry, I did want to point out one last thing just to answer questions that came up. So for CDL drivers, if a CDL driver is in a commercial motor vehicle, there is a DMV form. It's called DSMV 436. So that form outlines all the conditions that apply when you're in a commercial motor vehicle. If somebody who is driving driving their passenger vehicle and they happen to be a CDL holder, on the top of the 426 is a box that you check to identify this person has a CDL license. And that person knows that they are going to have the 1-year ALS administrative suspension because it's by federal regulation. That's not a New Hampshire law. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, known as FMCSA, has a section, and you won't remember this number, but just so the record's clear, it's 49 CFR 383.51. And that's the regulation that states must follow because CDLs are related to the federal program. And so that outlines that it's a 1 year for violating the state's implied consent law, no matter what state they're in, because it's one license, one driver, no matter where they're pulled over. So I think hopefully I've addressed some of your questions earlier, but I'm available if you have any other questions or need anything.
Thank you for your testimony. Do we have any? Nope, you did excellent as always.
Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
very much for your testimony. Does anyone else wish to testify on 620 who didn't get a chance to or didn't sign in? Yes, come on down. Did I miss you? State your name and go, well, wait a second till my. Okay, you're all set.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Tom Barron. I'm a traffic education specialist with AAA Northern New England. As you know, AAA is an auto club and membership organization with over 1 million members, both in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. And we advocate highly for policies that make our places a better place to live, roads safer, and to raise a family. And today I come in support of SB 620. AAA has made impaired driving prevention a top priority. And we believe this bill represents an important and necessary step towards improving roadway safety in New Hampshire. We've already heard about the high refusal rate, and we believe that this bill will address that. SB 620 directly addresses these concerns by increasing license suspension periods for refusal to submit to testing and aligning consequences more closely with the seriousness of the offense. and strengthening penalties for aggravated DWI. These measures are consistent with national best practices and the recommendations of traffic safety experts. This bill is data-driven, reasonable reform that will save lives by closing a known gap in our impaired driving laws. So on behalf of AAA, I respectfully urge the committee to recommend this bill ought to pass. And thank you for your time and your continual commitment to improving highway safety in the state of New Hampshire.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to testify who we missed or didn't get to write it on the form on 620? Going. Gone. Thank you. 12, 621. Thanks very much. I do. I'll give it to you in a minute. I just put it in some folder. Senator Long, I know I've kept you waiting. You picked the wrong bill to go behind. Probably my fault for scheduling you there. Good to see you, Senator. So introduce us to
621?
621. Be great, thank you.
You bet. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Madam President, and members of the Judiciary Committee. Senate Bill 621 is an effort to acknowledge to the public and to those families of cold cases. Currently, last I knew, there was 127 cold cases. So if you get 2 people per family trying to get a hold of the cold case unit, it's difficult. And there seems to be a lack of communication between the public and the cold case families, as what they say. So 621 is not looking to have the cold case unit give any information that they shouldn't be given. It's just to have the communication. And I met Tuesday with the Attorney General's office, and we agreed on language, which I believe was submitted to the committee. I haven't had an opportunity to get the amendment drafted, but I would have an amendment coming forward that makes it easier. We recognize that this commission doesn't have to meet 4 times a year. In December 1st, they're due a report. And the report was put in prior, after I got the bill in. After reading the report, I found it very eye-opening and very well. It was a good report. I believe there's some communication that's advancing. So in suggestion, we would sunset this in a couple of years if you accept the amendment. And the Attorney General and the Governor were the only ones that'd be picking somebody. Instead of having cold case families, it'd be members of the public, whether they're cold case related or not. It'd be members of the public on this commission. And like I said, they would meet once a year after the report to get more details of the report. And again, it's an opportunity for government to connect with the public. That's what I'm looking for in this.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Go ahead, Senator Reed.
I have just a process question. The amendment, that's not an official amendment yet. This is a replace all.
And that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you for coming in, Senator. Let's see, from the HE's office, we have Jeff Strelinson. Okay, and Chris Knowles. That's an easier one. You look like you guys are from the HE's office. I don't know. That's a compliment.
He's clearly the better looking one. Good afternoon.
They say that of me when it's a center game. Then we chose the wrong seat there, Jeff. This one's a
So
little.
that's a tough seat. We always put the tall guys in that one.
So I think we're going to introduce ourselves, but I wanted to start by just thanking you for hearing from us. So, Mr. Chair and committee members, my name is Chris Knowles. I'm the chief of the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit. I've been the chief of the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit for the last 10 months. I was appointed in April of last year. And in that time, we've seen significant changes to the unit, significant investment from legislatures like yourself, from support from government levels, at all levels of government, state government. Prior to my time on the cold case unit, I was an attorney. I was an assistant attorney general with the General Criminal Division of the Attorney General's office. I began there in 2023, prosecuting mostly homicide cases. And prior to that, I was a district attorney in an area in Alaska that was the size of Utah. In that capacity, I supervised an office of nearly 20 members, including attorneys, paralegals, victim witness advocates, investigators, and we had some civilian volunteers. During that time, I prosecuted homicides, significant cases, difficult cases throughout the state. And I, as I said, I came here in 2023 and joined the Attorney General's office. So the Attorney General's office has had the opportunity to meet with Senator Long to discuss the bill. We, in the Attorney General's office and on behalf of the cold case unit, we do not believe that the bill is necessary. And I can tell this committee that in the last year, in the last calendar year, we have met with over 650 members of the public, including families of our cold case victims. We've met with over 650, which was nearly triple of the contacts that we had in the previous calendar year for 2024. With that, that's due to the increased investment in our unit. Right now, so if I can go back just a step, the cold case unit was founded in 2009 by an act of the legislature. At that time, back in 2009, there was one attorney and one investigator assigned to the unit to handle those cases, to investigate those cases, to interact with families. We now have the most robust unit this state has ever seen. We have 2 dedicated investigators from the Attorney General's office, with each having over 35 years of experience investigating violent crimes. We have, so the unit is made up of both investigators, attorneys from the DOJ side, as well as state police. On the state police side of the cold case unit, we have 2 dedicated full-time seasoned investigators, one of which is here today, with vast experience in homicide investigation. We also have 2 auxiliary individuals that investigate our cold cases. And recently we have a dedicated victim witness advocate who's also here today, and has taken an effort to make those 650 contacts possible. So with that investment, we've seen a return on that investment in not only the number of people we've touched, the number of people we've contacted over the course of a year, both from the general public and from our families. But we've also seen successes, strides and successes. We've had recent charged cases. We've had recent resolutions because of that investment. And so we do not see this bill as necessary because the public has access to us. In my capacity as chief of the cold case unit, I travel across the state to meet with these families. We meet with them in their local towns. We meet with them sometimes in their houses. And we desire for them to see that availability, that we're open to them, that we're open to meeting, and we're willing to meet them. Just last night, I spoke with an individual around 11:30 p.m. about his mother's case. That is something that we seek. We want that communication, and we have seasoned experts that are versed in those contacts. And those are relationships that we value, that we maintain, and that we respect. Our advocates are often with the family from the inception of the case. And what that means practically is that they go out when there is an incident, when there's a murder, they go out and they often give the death notification to the family.
and they remain with that family, beside that family for years, for decades. These are relationships that we value and that we seek to grow. We maintain that contact even after the life of a case, after there's a conviction, after there's a sentencing. And the bill, as was previously proposed, would seek to set an intermediary between our office, between the cold case unit and our families and the public. And so we had concerns. So again, I go back to, we do not feel that this bill is necessary, even as amended. But if this committee seeks to adopt it, we would ask that it adopts the amended version. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I didn't give my colleague an opportunity to introduce himself, so I'll defer to any questions.
Thank you. Oh, we have a question for you first from
Yes.
Senator Kirsten.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here. One of my concerns, and again, I did co-sponsor this because I see the value in having the cold case unit, and I think you've done a great job and a great service to the state and the victims' families on the cases that you have solved. But what I'm concerned, a concern of mine, and I couldn't get an answer, was you have this commission of people and you're going to be talking about what you're doing. And I'm concerned about preserving evidence, that you might have evidence that you can't talk about, you can't release to the public. But in this commission, you might bring, it might come up, you might talk about it, and it could impede your investigations. And I saw that as a barrier, and I don't know how you get over that. So I was glad to get the letter from Attorney General Formella about that. But do you agree that that could be a very big problem as you start to reinvestigate, and it might take you off into a different direction and you're discovering new evidence, that if you release that information within a commission, it could get out before you finish the case?
If I could answer that question, I'd appreciate it. Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Strolzen. I'm a senior assistant attorney general at the New Hampshire Attorney General's office. Prosecutor almost 29 years, the last 23 at the AG's office doing homicide cases. When I started at the office, one of the first cases I worked on was the Bear Brook case, which we eventually solved. I've worked on a lot of cold cases. And your question, Senator, is a very good one. It was one of the concerns that we had in the original version of the bill. In these cases, there's always information that we know that we hope no one else knows. And we use that as a means to tell whether or not witnesses are actually telling us information they know firsthand, or whether or not they've learned it from somewhere else. And every time we in an investigation divulge information from the case file, we run the risk that we will taint potential witnesses out there, and it gives the defense a way to attack witnesses. They say the witnesses, you learned this because you read in a press release, or maybe somebody on a commission spoke about something they shouldn't speak about, and then it attacks that witness's credibility. So that was a significant concern in the original version of the bill. And we addressed that with Senator Long, and I think that we have assuaged those concerns, because I believe it's paragraph 4 of the bill says that essentially we don't have to share information that could, I'll say, impact the case. It's still, one of the concerns that we have is it's still hard sometimes to explain to people why you can't tell them things without getting into things you'd rather not tell them. You kind of end up in this catch-22 situation where you're like, I can't talk about that because, and sometimes the because is more than what you want to say, which is why, as we said, respectfully, we obviously prefer there not be this bill, but if there is going to be this bill, the revised version, I think Senator will probably address those concerns, but it means we've got to be very careful in our gatekeeping functions, because your concern is a valid one.
Yeah, follow up, Mr. Chairman. As attorneys, I know you're aware we have Article 91A, which deals with really agencies, anybody, government. You're subject to people asking you about information. And so that's another concern that I had, is what happens if somebody puts in a 91A request to this commission for information about a specific case? I don't know what's going to happen or what that's going to look like, whether you're exempt from 91A or you would have to turn over documents, because in either one, and I just got this, nothing says anything about Article 91A and any kind of exemption to 91A.
I mean, my understanding is the legislature has in some circumstances set forth that in a particular area, the activities in this area are exempt from RSA 91A. That doesn't happen here, but I think what happens is that it goes back to our agency to say we're going to have to be very careful about the information that we share so that we don't present an opportunity for someone to get information that could hurt the case. Again, it just requires more effort on our part to do that.
Well-
Maybe I'm not making myself very clear. It is a little late on it's only not even 3 o'clock, but the public has the right to ask any governmental agency for information about what's going on. That includes the press. And so unless there's a very specific exemption in state law that says, no, you can ask, but we're not going to give it to you, you will be subject to it. So you could say we're working on a case, a particularly case that really struck at the heart of New Hampshire citizens, and they want information. You're going to have to respond. There's no shield between you two. And my question is, maybe you can take it back to Attorney General Formella and ask him, do you need to have that shield to protect the investigation from 91A, and not your unit, it's the commission from having to reveal information that is part of an ongoing investigation.
And that's a valid concern, and we have some protections in the case law in New Hampshire from the New Hampshire Supreme Court that it talks about the fact that if we have an ongoing investigation that we can shield information and exempt it from 91A. That's what we would use to say to the commission, we can't share this information with you. And so if we don't share it with them, we think that would be one way, Senator, obviously, to protect us like that.
May I ask you, just could you please run it by Attorney General Formella and get his opinion? Because if we need to do something, now would be the time, rather than wait until there's an actual problem. And now, we have to turn the information over, and that could substantially affect the case.
We'll do that.
Senator Abbas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And somewhat touching on what my colleague just brought up. So I read, and I hope I'm looking at the right version, but it says the commission is authorized to share information learned in its annual meeting with the public. So I learned to look at that as once it's known to the commission, that would include even the members of the public appointed to the commission. And now that would 91A, all of that, and when they're allowed to share it. So it's not, I wouldn't think it's protected, but I guess I understand some contents of a case may still be protected, but once the commission learns about it, it gets kind of, I guess my point is, would it be difficult to have civilians on it, members of the public, in that capacity to really understand what can and can't be shared, and they may learn of something and maybe something shared incidentally, an inadvertent disclosure, which could happen. I'm just wondering, is that a concern anyone has, or how likely is that to happen?
So that goes back to kind of our original concerns with the bill, which is why we didn't think this was necessary. But according to the amended version of the bill, what would be shared with the commission is our annual report, and that is a public document. And so we control what's in that. We're careful about what's in there. And so whatever is in that annual report would be shared with the commission. And so that's something that could absolutely be released to the public without harming cases.
Senator Carson?
Thank you. We usually have our Senate attorney here, Mr. Lehman, and unfortunately he couldn't be here this afternoon, but he texted me, he's listening. So he texted me, he said, you could say that the commission has to run in 91A by the AG's office so that the AG can decide whether to object to disclosure before the commission releases the information. We do that with business information. So see if he would be amenable to that. It seems like that might solve the problem, and we would just have to get the correct language. Okay, thank you.
Senator Ridden?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. It's along the same lines of what they're saying, and we know that you all have the ability to know what can be disclosed and what can't be disclosed. You're in the middle of it. Is part of the issue here with the two public members who, I'm hoping they never get information that they have to keep secret. I think that's the first wall that needs to happen. But if there were not two public members on here, but two members who are well-versed in knowing what's public information, what's not, it could be members of police departments or something like that, would that give you a little bit more security about the information that might be out there or what they could say and not?
It can, but the reality is we all know the more times you share information, the more risk of even an inadvertent disclosure, which again goes back to our initial concerns, which is, we feel safest, kind of like all of you, right, when you control your own information. Anytime we share information, we lose that control and run the risk that someone, again, even inadvertently, could answer a question. And it could be something as simple as this. Somebody has information and they draw an inference from it, and then they answer a question based on the inference. That then goes out there. And it's based on some information, but again, it's their inference. Now it's out there, and that could be a concern for us. So I think all of us would always rather control our own information, which we'd rather do.
Senator Epps? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, follow-up?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So would this commission ever learn anything that had to be secret, or would this commission only know what's in the annual report that is public because that's one of their obligations, is that annual report?
It would depend, obviously, on whether, presumably the commission is not just going to simply accept the report and not ask us any questions.
Gotcha.
And so it will really depend on what the commission members ask, and then we'd have to determine what's appropriate to share or not. And so I think that's how it would work, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Epps.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in reading this, the commission, it says, may also assist with communication with the public concerning the activity of the cold case unit. I certainly can appreciate, why someone would want something like that, but at the same time, when you reopen a cold case, that's something that's normally announced to the public, and by announcing it or making that public, I guess concerning the activity of, what activity is exactly this commission trying to get to then communicate to the public?
It appears that in the first instance, the activity would be what's reflected in the annual report. But obviously, if the commission wanted to inquire about other activities, it would be incumbent on us essentially to be the gatekeepers and decide whether or not we could or could not share that information with them. And I think that's addressed in paragraph 4 of the bill. It gives us the ability to decline to provide information. There is obviously the chance of kind of a slippery slope here, which is if we say no, the commission member is going to contest that. Are we going to have potential issues? So again, it kind of goes back to we'd rather control. These are our cases to prosecute. We have the ethical obligation to control what we say to the public. We can be on the hook for that. We also have an ethical obligation to control what others say about our cases if they're connected to us, which is one of the concerns we had about the original way the bill was drafted. Could it get the attorneys on the case on the hook ethically if one of those commission members said something and then a defense attorney turned on and filed some motion in court? So again, it all circles back to we'd rather have the primary control. If we're not going to, this version is certainly more acceptable.
And Senator, if I could just follow up on that. Is that permissible? Thank you. So currently we utilize a director of communications in the Attorney General's office for release of information. And that's someone that's trained, highly skilled. Those are targeted releases, often for an investigative purpose. So we're very guarded in the information that is released publicly. And hence our concern with the bill as previously proposed.
And could I just follow up on that?
Oh, okay.
We have ethical constraints about what we can say to the public. We just have litigation constraints, meaning there's certain things we're going to do and not do for the case. But also I can tell you this, that the judges in New Hampshire hold us to a very high standard. They don't want us trying our cases in the public before it gets into the courtroom. And that's something that is appropriate. They don't want us making comments, or they want people connected with the investigation stepping out and saying things that could impact the defendant's right to a fair trial. So again, I just wanted you to understand, those are all the reasons why we tend to be pretty tight-lipped about what we say about cases until we get into a courtroom.
Senator Epps?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a hypothetical, though. What is a hypothetical example of the type of activity would even be in this report? I'm just trying to, I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around the information that they're trying to get to then disclose to the public, this commission's trying to get, what's an example of an activity?
So I actually have a copy of our annual report if you would benefit from that, but our report is actually going back to '09. And they're all available. Our annual reports are all available on our website. In those reports, we discuss growth of the unit, changes to the unit. We discuss the major successes the unit has had for that calendar year, the number of investigative tips that have been logged and followed up upon during the calendar year. We also discuss the number of victim contacts or next of kin contacts that we've had during a calendar year. Those are just a few examples of the information that's available. We often include press releases if we've had if we put out a release during that year. We'll include a brief synopsis of that case.
It's basically a year in review for the cold case unit.
Thank you.
I think one of the things that the bill was aimed at was maybe people don't always hear what we say, but the idea would be that this commission would kind of amplify that annual report and maybe make victims' family members feel like there is information available in case they missed what we say, another opportunity for them to get educated about what's going on. I think that was part of the intent.
Mm-hmm.
Senator Ridden?
I didn't think of this until you just said it. Is there so much detail in the report that it's the kind of testing that you're doing that might be new or something that would maybe tip somebody off to something that was going on, or is it not that detailed?
Again, we're very guarded with the details that are released publicly with what technology is available, what cases are being re-examined, things that may tip off not just the perpetrator of that case, but other perpetrators at large. So we're very guarded with the information that's released, but occasionally we will talk about something like forensic genetic genealogy and how that led to a breakthrough in a case. And the case that Attorney Strausen mentions, the Bear Brooks homicide, we talked at length about forensic genetic genealogy because that gave the final victim, Rhea Rasmussen, her name back after so long.
No, I'm all set. There's a lot of stuff I want to say, but.
Sure. Seeing no other questions? Thank you both for all your
Thank you
knowledge.
for your questions.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mallory Littman. Ms. Littman, I apologize for keeping you in this chamber for so long.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chairman and committee. Thank you for listening to me this afternoon. I should be pretty brief. I'm Sergeant Mallory Littman of the New Hampshire State Police, and I'm the commander of the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit. I've been a member of the Major Crime Unit for 10 years, and in August of last year, I was appointed the commander of the Cold Case Unit. The New Hampshire State Police and I oppose this bill. The New Hampshire Cold Case Unit already has a system for communicating with victims' families, and this system works. The unit is currently the most robust it has been since its inception in 2009, which we just heard from Attorney Knowles and Attorney Strausen. This unit now consists of many investigators, prosecutors, and victim witness specialists. These members of the cold case unit are highly trained individuals, and a specific investigator and victim specialist is currently assigned to every one of our 127 cold cases. The victims' families have direct access to these assigned investigators and the advocate, and we currently actively meet with victims' families, as Attorney Knowles spoke about. As displayed in the annual report, which we also just spoke about, the cold case unit has been able to close several cases over the past year, as well as make an arrest in the Paul Hurley homicide. If this bill were to be made into law, it would disrupt our current system and it would affect our active homicide and suspicious missing persons investigations. It would not only slow down investigations by creating unnecessary work, but it would also potentially affect the ability to prosecute and bring justice to our families and the victims themselves. It could also potentially violate rights of suspects and witnesses by releasing information in these cases to non-law enforcement that could be members of the committee. I would like to emphasize that our current system works, and I don't feel that it is necessary to have an amendment to the bill.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions? Seeing none? Quick to the point. Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to testify on 621 who hasn't? Seeing none, that'll end the hearing. Do you have time, or we don't need you? You have to go somewhere.
You don't need me for.
No, I always need you. You're good, but I don't know if you have to jump out.
I don't know, the only
I'd like
one,
to do.
we could probably do the one with Rashadi if she doesn't want it.
Yeah, she doesn't want it. So I was gonna do 3, but we don't have, it could be wrong.
Well, I think the last one.
The last one, no.
Anyone,
Yeah, no, I'm not
but,
touching the last one. So the first one was, yeah, can I talk first before I do that? No, I don't mean in a bad way. So the first one, Fenton's Act 409 covers it. The police or state police are happy with 409. Sorry.
make a motion, we go into executive session.
Second, all in favor of going into executive session?
Aye.
We'll go in order, so we're gonna start with, actually, just do Richardi's first,
No,
which
no,
was.
553 is first.
Okay,
We'll do that one first.
we'll do it in order. That sounds like a good way.
Okay.
Seeing that we have 409 to cover everything, Senator Fenton's fine with that. The motion will be in a minute, interim study. We'll pass it on the floor, as Senator Abbas suggested, table it in case we needed it, in case 409 dies in the house.
So I second the interim study motion.
Okay, great. All in favor of the interim study motion?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm gonna make a motion for the consent calendar.
No, we didn't want to do that, right?
Oh, no, because you want to table it.
Yeah,
Nope.
because I want to table it.
Okay, who's
Okay.
gonna take this one up? then?
I'll take it up.
Well, no, why don't you
Oh.
let Daryl, because he can just stand
Oh,
up
yeah,
and
you
table
can
it.
do it. That's good. Very good. Thank you, Joe. Senator Epps, take it. It's one down. Okay, I'm gonna make a motion for interim study on 618.
Second.
Since, all in favor of the interim study motion?
Aye. Now I'll move consent.
There you go. That's a good
Okay.
one.
Second.
Yep, all in favor of the consent, we got the all in favor of consent? We got the second. Aye.
Aye.
Senator Abbas,
And I don't know if we can, because I can't take it off.
I'll take it up. Okay, we're gonna go to 620. I have an amendment to 620, which increases the period to 12 months and 3 years on the second part if you have a,
Mr. Chair, make a
Repeat
motion
it.
about to pass.
thank you. Make it first and second. All in favor of passing amendment, I'm sorry,
Mr. Chairman, what's the amendment that you're offering?
it's, yes.
I make a motion about to pass on amendment 0011S.
Senator Abbas, did you second?
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor of amendment 0011S, say aye.
Aye.
Then I'd make a motion that we pass the bill as amended.
Second.
All in favor of passing the bill as amended, say aye.
Aye.
And I'll take it out.
Um,
No, I'd rather be, yeah, that's good.
Okay, I make a motion for the consent calendar.
Seconded by Senator Abbas. All in favor of the consent motion?
Aye. And you're gonna take.
And I'm gonna take it.
Okay.
Second, and with motion to come out of exec, all in favor, come out of exec.
Aye.
Thank you all, good work, 3 things done, yay.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
good. It's good. So this is, this was, You know how to rock and roll.
I sometimes am okay. Have a pen.
Oh,
That's your pen. Pen.
All right, that's good. Okay. That was great getting that text.